Well, welcome. We have a very good situation here this year and a very sad situation. The good situation is we have qualified candidates running for positions. The sad situation is we don't have enough. As much as I'm happy that nobody's running against you, it's sad that nobody's standing up to say, put me in, because eventually the day's going to come when we have to replace our elected officials. But let's start with an introduction, if there is somebody who doesn't know you.
Great to see you. Well, I take the fact that no one's running against me is a sense of confidence that people believe that I'm doing the right thing for them as residents of the community. That's my goal every day. And it was my goal when I was the police chief. So, I'm pleased. I agree with you that as far as people's involvement, I wish there was much more. I do receive emails and calls and things of that nature, as my colleagues do, so you
But
do your
Tom,
best.
an indication that I've always used as to whether it's your position or you, the individual, is when you run for town meeting member, you're consistently pulling the highest number of votes in the precinct. That's a positive sign from the people of what they think you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, that respect, that confidence that they have, and because it's mutual. I have the utmost respect for the residents
I
of
just
this
wish we
community.
could get more people. I mean, when you were drawing 9% of the population voting, that's a scary movie.
Well, if you remember, my first election, which was during the COVID period, was the largest turnout the town's ever seen, I believe. There was an extended period to vote. We held the election in June, if you remember.
Yep.
So I ended up with a sunburn instead of a chill. But nevertheless, I think some of that was people were in their homes, people were in the town, much more so than even now. With people working from home, more and more people are returning, as they say, to the office.
Well, the scary part is when you start looking at 9% turnout. We had a school committee election that was 13 vote difference. I mean, 13 votes made the difference of which candidate was selected.
We had the one election where the person that was elected thanked his two children for voting.
For vote.
Because it was their first occasion that they legally could vote. So that's pretty telling how close things can be. But we've seen elections across the state. I can remember a city council race in Boston. It was one vote. So every vote does count when all is said and done.
Well, the municipal side of the government in Milford, do I guess what's the biggest concern for this coming year?
It's the concern that every manager should have, which is finance. It's people's tax dollars. We've all had a chance to look at the governor's proposed budget, and it's going to have an impact, a serious impact.
Well, for Chapter 70 for the school support, I saw a 0.6% increase proposal.
Right. 2/3 of 1%.
2/3 of 1%. And when you think about it, I mean, you were worse off as police chief. You were like 90-some% salaries. But they're still in the 80s, and those contracts are going up 2-3% a year by contract. So something's got to be cut if that holds.
Yeah, there were years where we did make cuts. Back in the early 2000s and then again in the teens. there's that cycle. And some of it is, you have to operate as a team. So Finance Committee puts out, from the finance director, the line that we want people to, toe. But, as you mentioned, the police department, there were years where my budget was about 94% personal services.
Salaries.
Meaning salaries. So you can only cut so much from the expenses because you're still going to get the bills to repair the police cars. You're still going to get, the other cost factors that come into play.
Well, when you have 5 or 6% total for everything but salaries, there's only so many pencils you can't buy.
Right. If your impact is, say, arguably 3% on your personal services, you can't find 3% in the expenses, even if you wiped them out. The total, the things that you had to absolutely
Yeah,
have.
but you were famous for, I remember the year you were upset that you left $150 left in your budget.
Well, in managing the agency, the way I managed was those things as far as improving, for instance, equipment, things of that nature, I would hold off coming up towards the end of the fiscal year. So into April, May, June, when I knew I would make budget and close out. So, as you know, I didn't overrun a budget in 17 years. I never went back and said, please give me more funds.
No, but you even turned back money to help other departments sometimes.
There, on 3 occasions that come to mind, the library and then the fire department, on 2 occasions where they ran into particular emergencies during the year, which impacted on their budgets adversely. So rather than go and purchase that equipment, I held on to the funds, and the finance director at town meeting move it from one line item to the other so that all of the budgets close out without a deficit, because
Which is the law,
right, in Massachusetts, the only line item you can deficit spend is snow
snow and
plowing.
ice.
Yeah. So, but that's really, the level of respect between department heads. And I think it carries to this day, where there's that respect that someone could run into a problem, and are you going to rise to the occasion and help them with that problem? Or sit back in the bleachers and, watch it as a show.
Yeah, but since, this year it's going to be $180 million, about, depending on what we have to cut or what we have to save. You don't have a choice but to make that level match your spending. How do you, as the municipal head, deal with the whole town budget when you only control 40% of it?
Well, that's where the importance of having those relationships with the other boards, with the other department heads, and that sense of mutual respect that, everyone is going to have to pitch in. We did back 2003, 2004, where we didn't fill lieutenant positions that were vacated because they did early retirement. And also there were, in that year, I believe it was 4 positions that we cut. So that was, in that period of time, that was 10% of the police staff, were cut. And some say, well, if you could make do then, why can't you make do? Because I was the one that had to do, so you essentially took on the responsibilities of those lieutenants as the chief.
The work still had to get done.
Sure, without a question. But also there was that camaraderie or that respect for the other departments. There are small departments, 2, 3 people, at a town hall. You can't cut there. I mean,
I was gonna say, how do you cut a tenth of a person?
right, and they don't have any kind of, there's the two sides, as you know, personal services and expenses. They don't have any expenses. They're all within the central budget, for instance, at town hall. So the tax collector's office, you really can't cut people.
Well, I don't think most residents understand that a budget has two parts, one being personnel and one being stuff. And you can't move money between the two without town meeting approval.
Right, and that's what the town departments, school department can.
Well, they have full autonomy.
Right. So we fund personal services and expenses. The school superintendent can expend the funds as they deem appropriate for the educational system. The police chief and fire chief, by way of example, they cannot spend expense money to keep personnel, on the payroll. And likewise, you can't take payroll money and spend
put
it
it
on
for expenses.
So you can go back to town meeting, and that's some of when other departments had some issues that we just discussed. We went back to town meeting, and you're able to move money from one line item to the other. Town meeting.
Well, that's the second last article on the warrant every
Right.
year, which says, okay, X department had an overage of $50 in their personnel line, but they're under $60 expense. Town meeting, would you approve
Right.
shifting the money? Or in some cases, like you did, the police, when you had police, you held off some expenses to help the fire department that year.
Right. So they would transfer from the police line item, town meeting would.
It still has to be town meeting.
Yes.
And I think that's one thing that people don't appreciate, is that town meeting giveth and town meeting taketh away. And that's the only way a dollar can be spent or moved.
Without a question. And that's where, justifications are made. I mean, they're made along the way, with the finance committee, with the selectmen, with, in the case of the schools, the school committee, along with finance committee. So the process works.
Works in Milford.
It does.
Some of the towns around, you read that you brought up the relationship between you as a department head, now you as a executive, and the other departments is strong. Is that the only reason we don't see the infighting in the newspapers that you see for other towns?
I think so. I think that there is that level of respect for the other department heads, for the other boards. At least in my experience. I've worked in towns as a police chief where there was that friction. And it's not healthy. It's not healthy in trying to, overall, goals for individual agencies.
You have to have people at the head of the departments that understand long-term views. That this year you may have to give up some, but next year you may go to the fire department and say, I'm hurting a little bit on here because of a special situation. Can you help me this year?
Well, as you know, on Capitol, we did that often, where, people might not be aware, but you have a 5-year plan, and within that 5-year plan, I could be coming up, or when I was the police chief, or even now, a department that we oversee, and your project is next in line, and someone else has an emergency that takes place, their HVAC system goes down. It has to be replaced.
The highway barn, the year that 2 of the systems went down.
Right. So that's when you say, okay, I'll wait another year. And you do your best to patch things. An example would be the roof at the police station. You know, we went several years where other projects actually went by us because we could patch up the issues that we were having, for at least a period of time. But I saw that in department heads generally, in my experience.
Well, the select board just sponsored an article to buy a house.
Yes.
And people are asking, why did we need to buy another house for the town?
Well, I don't know that we need a house. I do know that we need parking. So some history on that is, even back in 2002, when I came to the police department, I learned from one of my predecessors who grew up in this community, Chief Liberto. And the chief told me that when they were building out the police station from what was once the old post office and put in the back end of the building, the building committee actually looked at that home of taking it by eminent domain. And the sound decision that they made was to show respect for the family that lived there, the elderly couple. And the town did not move to take the house by eminent domain. During my tenure, we did approach, after they were deceased, we did approach the owners with the child of that couple, with the thought of purchasing the home. And the funds just weren't there for what they were looking for. The house was presently, for a period of time, not lived in by the family. It was a rental unit. And it's been vacant now since it went on the market last June.
Last summer.
Yeah, last June. So we went and had an appraisal done, the select board did, and approached the owner and offered the owner what the independent appraiser told us the property was worth. And they rejected that offer. So that's why we went to town meeting. Town meeting had to authorize to take the property by eminent domain, which we will do, and we'll pay the
Fair
property
market.
owner the fair market value. They have the opportunity to take us to land court if they feel the property's worth more than what we're giving them. And it'll be decided by a judge.
You know, I felt good when I learned the history that we wanted to buy this property, but it had a little old lady living in it and her family. And it'd be hard pressed to go to town meeting and say, we're going to use eminent domain and evict a long-standing resident. So we held off. That made me feel good.
Yeah, as I said, that was a sound decision on the part of the building committee, for the police station. I think they made the right decision.
And now when it's, the eminent domain is just a process in which the town can buy the land.
Correct.
It's not necessarily a negative thing.
Right. And coming up to that, there's, on that street, you have on the side where the police station is, you have the police station, then you have that house, and then there's a vacant lot. That vacant lot was owned by Milford National Bank. When Milford National Bank was being sold, Kevin Meehan was the principal stockholder. I met with Kevin Meehan, and he offered to deed that lot to the town to be used by the police department.
So we end up with the police station, the old post office
Right.
expanded, a lot that we own, and this, I call it a house, but it's really the little lot that's kind of in between the two.
We actually own, right, so we own a lot on the other side of the house where we stored police vehicles, things of that kind, the signboards, other equipment. Difficulty that we're having is there was never enough spaces for the police vehicles as well as personal vehicles. People come to work. So what we're finding is they're placing the police vehicles onto, for instance, Milford
Home
Federal
National.
Bank. Well, we're using Milford National, and there's a business coming in there, so we're gonna lose all those spaces.
That was the worry I had, is to say, today I see all the cruisers in the unused Home National property,
Right.
which it's nice that the owner is saying, go ahead, I'm not using it. But if somebody buys it, where do the cruisers go?
Yeah, I don't know that they're saying go ahead. They just haven't said get out. So there's a difference. Where some of the other property owners, and due respect to them, they're trying to operate a business. And all of a sudden you have private vehicles from police personnel or police vehicles even parked. So then you find they're starting to take up spaces out on Main Street. And the more spaces they take on Main Street, you can't get into some of the businesses. So there's that ripple effect of the impact that we can have. The home that we're taking by eminent domain, the town has always had its sights on that particular property. Long-term, very much like we see at Dairy Queen and, for instance, the Dunkin' Donuts down at Fortune Boulevard in 16, is to put in the canopies with the solar, for two reasons. One, you place the vehicles out of the weather, and secondarily, you generate an electricity for the facility. So there's a savings there as well. So,
Well, I think the biggest thing that caught my attention was, I don't necessarily feel comfortable having town-owned vehicles in somebody else's property.
right.
I mean, it's, like I said, it's nice that the owner hasn't said, get out
But when
But-
they do, you have to put those 15 or 20 vehicles somewhere.
somewhere.
So you're going to end up taking spaces in the business district. You're just going to filter over. And so, that's, a number of things came together. Financially, things came together because we, the town, had taken 3 properties on Central Street several years ago. And this board, we sold back
One
of the properties to the furniture company, which brought those funds back, and those funds are being used for this eminent domain. So for us to take that property, level the home, and grade things, town meeting had to appropriate about $100,000, round number, to accomplish it. So a number of things came into line at the right time to accomplish that particular effort. I mean, there are other requests that are out there, and it was prioritizing them. You have the senior center, which the parking is overwhelmed. They're parking along North Bow Street. They're parking on the side streets, Jefferson, et cetera. So they're looking for parking. And again, it's prioritizing. The highway department was looking about purchasing the Pinto property right there on Front Street. So it's prioritizing, but it's also looking at the ability of the town to accomplish what's in the interest of the town, but how do you accomplish it
Well, the
financially?
Pinto property's always been a target. Because if you think about it, if we get a clean bill of health on environmental factors, you could make that into an island. It would be all, I'm going to use a profane word sometimes, DPU. It could be a Department of Public Works island that we would
Right.
control. The question is it contaminated?
Yeah, and the broader question is, on a point of just priorities of
Where does it fit in?
what do we need to do And then, can we do it financially? In dealing with the issue at the police department, which would impact the business district, it rose to the top past those other, priorities that other agencies or departments have.
Well, you didn't have much of a choice because the rumor mill is that Robbie has to put the officers through training of making 40-point turns.
Yeah.
Because the parking space is so tight to the back of the building.
Right.
That when they're bringing in guests, I guess that's a polite way of putting it, that they got
Or not at all,
oh, not at all.
which creates a separate issue as far as safety.
Security and safety.
Yeah. So, but you can't just drive in and turn
It's not a turn in.
like you would drive into your garage at home. That's not happening. It's,
But like you say, from a security point of view, your guests are not the most secure people all the time anyway. And
Yeah.
having a driver trying to make a 4, 5, 6-point turn, it's got to be distracting.
right. Or don't make the turn. Park in the back lot
And have them come out.
and hope for the best. So,
Milford's been pretty unique. I mean, you've got a unique view into the police department because you built a lot of it. We've had demonstrations towards the Milford Police by our residents, but they're unique. There's 2 I can remember,
yeah,
and it was in support of the police.
right.
Why?
I
I think about it and I say, why? What makes Milford so different from other towns?
I think the relationship between the police officers and the residents of the community is really, there's an appreciation between people. And I think that the residents of our community see the police officers as just what they are. They're people. They're doing a job. Sometimes parts of the job they don't like and other people don't like. Nevertheless, there's a responsibility there to ensure that the public is safe. But I think that, the example that I give people is, I dealt with 2 neighbors that were not getting along, and it seemed to be an everyday tit for tat, call the police department. So this one, the music was too loud when it's not. It's a summer afternoon. And that one, they're out there too late, and it's 10 o'clock, not midnight, or 11 o'clock, which is the bylaw. So the officers, when they described it to me, they went to the one home, and the family was having a cookout, and so they all had a sandwich while they listened to the complaint. And they went to the other side, talked to the family there, and once again had a second meal as they try to bring people together. I ended up dealing personally with, I knew both parties, both families. So again, you go there and very respectful, very polite, nice people. They just weren't seeing eye to eye. And, fortunately, we were able to get past all that. And it just went away as being a concern. Things worked out. And I think it's that relationship. I can recall a woman coming from Shaw's, and she actually posted on Facebook and, wrote a nice thing and sent a letter to me. But the police officer stopped. She's an African-American woman, but it was raining, and she's walking down West Street carrying her groceries, and she said all of a sudden this police car stops, and it's blue lights go on. What does this cop want? So it's on a pouring rain. And the cop got out and he said, come on. And he took her groceries. He opened the back hatch on the cruiser, put her groceries in there, told her, get in, and drove her home and helped her get her groceries in the house. And she was beside herself that he didn't just drive by. And I think that, a lot of that is that sense of community, that sense of belonging, that there is a comfort level. And I know when we hire police officers, they come from other agencies and they're beside themselves.
But that's an interesting point, because most media outlets are talking about how hard it is to recruit police officers, and especially ones with experience.
Right.
Because you taught me that, was it 6 months, the
6
academy?
months. 6 months, yeah.
So if I hire Joe Smith with no police experience, who hasn't been through the academy, I'm paying him or her 6 months' salary to learn. If I hire somebody that's already gone through the academy, they can start work right away.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes. So, even now, they don't have difficulty finding people, as we see. So an officer retires, then we get applications from people that, showing an interest, as we, in police departments, called lateral transfers. But likewise with the fire department. People want to work in Milford. The relationship with the community it's different. It really is. And you can see it, especially around times, the holidays and other times. You cannot go hungry at the police department or fire department. There's food coming in the door every day.
Yeah, I remember we used to have still do have a welcome to Holy Cross party for incoming families, and I hosted it, so I got stuck with 4 or 5 pizzas. What do you do with it? When my daughter was there, she could call her football friends or
Right.
hockey friends, baseball friends, and the locusts would show up. When she left, I didn't know what to do, so I drove to the fire department. I figured they're the ones that are there 24/7.
Right.
And I was amazed, because at first I ran into a firefighter who didn't know me, and you could see hesitancy on taking food. Luckily, there were some Milford people that came right in and said, oh, he's okay. But it was like sad that they had to worry about people dropping off food.
Right. But they, you see it now, even on, on Facebook, and this particular business or that business, and they go by the police station, and bring 3 pizzas. It's not the 3 pizzas.
It's the idea.
It's the sentiment.
Yeah.
It's the fact that a local business thought, geez, I appreciate what these folks do. So.
Well, it was like, I remembered when we had our block party, and a kid fell off the wall, cut himself, and we called 911, and the Milford firefighters showed up within minutes. I will never forget that. So, when we had the opportunity to say, thanks. 3 pizzas aren't going to affect Mark's budget, but it was the idea that we thought about them.
Without a question. And you find that today, as we saw with, at a time where people were protesting against the police and calling for cuts with police departments, as you indicated, Milford had people along Main Street holding signs in support of
Well,
the
that,
police
and I
officers.
remember the town meeting where a budget was presented, and one town meeting member made a motion to pull the police budget out to defund it or cut it. I've never seen 200 people go quiet. The motion was legit.
Right.
But even Mike Nofree back then, who always automatically seconded motions, just said, "Is there a second?" And none of the 200 odd people seconded the motion. So again, it's little things like that that if I was the chief at that point, I'd sit there and say, "Thank you for the vote of confidence."
Right. And I've always said they're very, very fortunate that the relationship is the way it is. And the relationship between particularly police and fire. Because as you indicated, the person that falls off the wall, I don't care who shows up to help me. I just want someone to show up to help me.
Yeah, but on the other hand, it made me feel a lot more comfortable
Sure.
that I looked and I saw Teddy DiPaolo,
Right.
I saw Marshall, Scotty Marshall, I saw 3 people that I know were involved with my kids. It probably wouldn't matter if it was Joe Smith, Judy Smith, or whatever. They would have gotten the same level of care. But it felt more comfortable knowing that I know the people, I know how much they care. And they're right there taking care of the kids.
It does make a difference.
The names that we see on the fire, police, municipal are familiar. I don't know if it was you or Vinny before you that told me that there was a preference always given to people who come from Milford because they tend to stay around a lot longer.
When we went out of civil service, we built into the process that living in Milford, you receive points. If you're a veteran, you receive points for a college degree.
People
So-
can understand if you're a veteran, if things on that line. Why would you get extra points if you come from Milford?
Well, for a number of reasons. One, you're someone that we're going to put to work a lot quicker. You know your way around the community. You already have a sense of the community as well. So as we've been discussing, that personal relationship, that tempo. So it's easier to take that person and put them out, to provide services to the community versus someone that's not from the community. It's not only learning where East Street is or where, where I live, Isaiah is, it's a matter of also appreciating the relationship that the departments or the personnel in those departments have with the community. So, and the expectation that.
Well, I remember when I was a kid, Carlos Ducaral pulled me aside once, and we were a teenager, we were fooling around we were going in the Casey pool when it wasn't opened. And he came over, and there's this angst when you see a police officer with the blue lights stopping you. He looked, he said, "I know this was a mistake. I don't have to discuss this with your mother, do I?" There was nothing more powerful he could have said. I'm not going back in there. He let me go, me and 3 other kids. But knew there was this responsibility now not to do it again. And that's because he was from the Heights.
Right. He was good to people. His reputation, a lot of people that, were dealing with work permits and other things of that kind, who had immigrated here, but he would help people navigate their way, with government agencies, to include the town itself and the different departments. He really had an honorable reputation.
Well, I think of Joe Dias, same way.
Yeah.
Carlos. There were a number of people that just stood out as they were police officers, but they were members of the community first.
Right.
And you respected the position, but you respected the officer first.
The person, yeah. I mean, it's not, I grew up in the city. I grew up in Boston. I grew up in a housing project, and you would think, oh my God, that's different. No, the police officer that walked the beat, Jimmy Chasen, they called him Smiley, was his nickname. But Smiley knew every one of us. So if we were throwing snowballs or, at vehicles or doing something we ought not be doing, you could run, but he'd be calling off names. And later that night, there'd be, he'd use the baton and bang on the door. And my parents, other parents, they had the utmost respect for him. He didn't arrest a lot of people, but he most certainly provided some control in that neighborhood.
The influence, it's like the people I mentioned.
Sure.
They did more by talking to me and making me understand that I'm embarrassing my family if he goes and talks to my mother than he could have done if he could have arrested me.
Because he knew what your mother would do. So he was a very smart police officer, rather than involve himself that way.
How are we doing with the federal task force and ICE and all that as a town? Does the select board get involved?
You deal with people so that they appreciate what the state of the law is in Massachusetts. Police officers in Massachusetts cannot enforce a civil order. In fact, police officers get their powers the way the statute's written. They have all the powers of a constable except civil process. So a police officer can't involve themselves in a civil matter.
Now, illegal immigration.
Illegal immigration, if it's a detainer is a civil action. A detainer is a civil order. Police officers in Massachusetts cannot enforce those. So if someone's arrested, even for something serious, what takes place is once they're fingerprinted, the fingerprints go from Milford police instantaneously to the state police system where they're logged in. From the state police system, they go to the FBI and Homeland Security.
So it's like CODIS type stuff?
So once they hit Homeland Security, which as I said is instantaneous, the phone rings. And it's because it's all computer generated. And it's ICE saying, we just sent you a detainer, did you get it? And if you did, you tell them yes. Aside from that, they tell you, well, we're coming out. They can come out. They don't have access only to the public area of, for instance, the police station, which is the lobby. So they have a right of access to the lobby.
But now you hear the executive of Boston, Mayor Wu, saying, I'm not going to let our officers work with ICE.
Right.
Now, first of all, that seems contradictory to me, that if ICE is enforcing a law, how does a law enforcement officer of the local town not work with them?
Because if they're enforcing a civil order, in our Supreme Court, Massachusetts, the SJC, has said that we do not have, police in Massachusetts do not have the authority to enforce a civil order. So if it's a civil detainer, there's nothing we can do to help them. If they have an arrest warrant, then the involvement of the police would be that that person's a fugitive from justice. Because it's an arrest warrant from another jurisdiction, meaning not a city or town of Massachusetts. It'd be like an arrest warrant from Rhode Island. You're not arresting them on the arrest warrant, you're arresting them as a fugitive from that warrant. You cannot do that with detainers. So if the police end up getting called to a situation, they're there to keep the peace. They're there to make sure that those federal law enforcement officers can do their job without being harmed. Likewise, that other people don't get harmed. We had a case in Milford, right next door to the police station, where they went to get an individual, ICE did, and he fled on foot. Milford police can't assist him in chasing this guy down because they can't enforce that civil order. So the Milford cruiser, when it went down there, he sat there. And they had their foot chase, placed the guy in custody. The only thing that officer was going to do is make sure that nobody interfered with them doing their job, meaning by way of harm, and likewise, that no one else was put in a position of harm.
So the select board really doesn't have much say.
Not at all. The law is well established, and I think that people want to try to shape, they want to come up with a scenario in which the local police are involving themselves. They're not. They don't have the authority to. So
Well, we had
don't.
that discussion saying, we can't enforce you can't deport somebody to Bellingham or deport somebody to Rhode
We
Island.
don't do it, right? Yeah, so those orders, they enforce them. And if they get the information, from the booking system, and that we have a person who allegedly committed a serious offense, then ICE will either come out and wait for them to get released from the police station, or wait till they go to court, which happens often.
But if I'm considered a fugitive, and there's I guess, judicial warrant.
Right, for a warrant, then the police officers have an obligation to involve.
They can
themselves.
help no matter what if it's a warrant.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we do get Homeland Security. They come out, do an investigation, human trafficking.
We had the guy that, the original ICE raid, people were up in arms, and then I called Robbie, our police chief, and said, what's the scoop? Now, first of all, I'm fortunate that as a resident of Milford, I've got access to the police chief.
Yeah.
I can call him and ask. But secondly, he said, no, they picked up people with warrants. One was a
Right.
fugitive, gun runner, child trafficker, and drug seller.
Yeah, there are, working with the FBI, working with Homeland Security has always taken place. You can get Homeland Security along with the state police investigators that do child pornography, and they've traced it down to a particular IP address at a particular residence, and in a lot of those cases, rather than go through the federal system to get a search warrant or an arrest warrant, they'll come to the local detectives, present them with the evidence, and from there the local officer will do that. Because sometimes it's a timing factor. By the time you get that search warrant going through the federal process, it could be days, and you end up losing your evidence. Where a local police officer, you can get a judge or a clerk magistrate on the phone 24 hours a day. And nowadays you can do things electronically. So I can scan and send the information, where back in my days working investigations, you would go to the clerk magistrate's home, because everything had to be typewritten. So today, that police officer, Milford, I saw Detective Crystal Gallagher up at the court the other day. She was seeking a search warrant. And it's from an incident that just took place, that they're investigating. And so she's going to have that search warrant in a matter of an hour.
Wow.
Um,
So help me understand what a sanctuary city is. I don't understand.
From what I garner, it's very much like the city of Boston, where the mayor has indicated to the police commissioner, you know, I- one, don't ask people their immigration status. That's, I hope that's fairly common, what's your interest in someone's immigration status? For a local or state
Yeah.
police agency. But it's also, don't involve yourself in those particular matters, immigration matters.
But you're saying that you can't anyway.
I'm saying precisely, you can't anyway. And even if it's an arrest warrant and ICE is going to execute their own warrant, or Homeland Security, they're going to execute the arrest warrant. If you're there just to maintain the peace.
Well, it seems like they have to be there because you got so many people protesting. I
Right.
mean, this thing about wearing hoods, I could see people saying, I want a number, a confidential number on an ICE agent. So if they abuse power, I can report Officer 3208 did this. But I can see the ICE officer worried about people showing up at his home or her home.
Right, it's personalized, in which we've seen as far as doxing or people going even to hotels where
So they can't sleep
they
at
just
night.
staying. Yeah, I think it's there's a balance there as far as protection. I don't disagree with you as far as being able to identify who you're dealing with. The example I'll give you, if you see, for instance, in Boston, if they have on the helmet has across the front an ID number, front and back,
Ah,
so that you can identify someone. And in today's, everyday life with iPhones, with cameras, everyone has a camera. So to take a photo or a video of that particular ID, I don't disagree with it. I also agree with those officers, and it's actually protection for them too, as far as, and I'm talking about ICE, as far as body cameras, because the altercations are far too many. You don't see that with local police. You just don't
no, but
see that.
I can't say how I would react if somebody was driving a car towards me. You sit there and say, well, an officer pulled a gun to protect himself or herself. Well, until I'm in front of a car, I won't know how I'll react.
Yeah. I mean, I did police work for 42 years, and on a number of occasions I had to point a gun at someone. I thank God that I never had to use it. So, and I think that's the case with particularly local police officers. They'll work 40 years and never ever use that gun.
And gut feel, because I'm not asking for authenticated data. Of the police staff in Milford, what percentage ever had to pull a gun in the line, discharge a gun in the line
Oh,
of duty?
discharge. I mean, in the time I've been here in Milford, so 2002, you're looking at round number 25 years if we want to, grade into 2026. But, it's 23, 24 years. Once police officer discharged a firearm.
So we've got approximately 50 police officers times 25 years, and there's one instance
Yeah,
where a gun was discharged in the line of duty.
right.
But you never hear that statistic. I read the papers, the New York Times makes it seem like it's the Wild Wild West.
And you don't want to be that statistic. That's the other thing. I never met a cop that, had that mindset of, I just can't wait to use this gun. it's not out there. I've never met, and I'm
And
talking
you've been there 40
some
years.
people, yeah, that I thank God. I came close, but I never had to. When you walk away, you have some sleepless nights that, what if? It's pretty scary.
Well, again, I don't tend to second guess people that are first responders. Because if there's shots fired, I'm running that way. And I'm watching the people running that way. And until I become a person that runs that way, I'm not going to really know. It's like somebody said, would you ever shoot somebody? It's so easy for me to say no. But if there was somebody with a pistol to my daughter's head, how would I react?
And what I say to people is, you don't know until you're there.
That's my point.
And that's, it's very much, I get that question, how would you react if you were in front of that car? I don't know.
In the abstract, it's easy to say, I would never shoot somebody. But wait a minute, that's my daughter who is having a gun pointed at her.
Yeah.
Well, I could say you've run a good campaign this year. And I'm serious, because the campaign you've run is the years of serving the community. And that, I think, is more an indication of why you have no competitor. So it's not how you ran for 6 months. It's how you've run in this town for decades. So thank you.
No, thank you. I always say to people, they say, thank you for your service. I say, no, it's the other way around. Thanks for letting me do it. I loved working as a police officer, and I really enjoy serving the community on the select board. I really do.
Well, that's going to be taxed with the budget situation. We'll have to see how we make it work.
Yeah, but that's, that's the function of that position, and that's where the challenges lie. So the opportunity to be involved in those challenges, I relish the opportunity. I'm grateful.
Thank you, and we look forward to another 3 years.
Thank you, Al.
And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, thanks for watching. May God bless. May tomorrow be a safer and a better day than tonight. Good night, all.